Okay, good evening, everyone. Nice to see you guys. We'll get going with the Committee of Adjustment meeting for August 13th, 2020. We do have some opening remarks, some procedural uh, instructions to get through before we can get to our items on the agenda this evening. So I'll just uh, I'll just read the script as I'm provided, and we'll provide some good information to those listening at home, as well as some information for the agents. So good evening, members of the committee and members of the public. I now call the Committee of Adjustment to order, as this meeting is being held electronically due to the COVID-19 pandemic. I will go over some rules of procedure for the benefit of the members and the viewing public. This meeting is being streamed live via the City of Brantford YouTube account. Members of the committee will be muted upon entering the meeting and throughout when they are not speaking in order to reduce background noise. All web cameras for the committee members shall be turned on throughout the meeting. If a member needs to leave their seat, please leave the camera on so we recognize that you are away. Staff will be requested to join the video meeting should they need to answer questions of any members. Any member of committee participating shall indicate they wish to speak, ask questions by pressing the digital raise your hand function on the participant list screen. Your hand will stay raised until you're called upon, and staff will lower your hand when you've been called upon by the chair. Movers and seconders of motions shall be indicated by raising your physical hand on camera, and the chair will call you out as the mover or the seconder. All members of the committee participating via online video conference will vote via physical show of hands. A recorded vote will be taken by the clerk. Applicants, agents, owners, and delegations are participating via Zoom or telephone accordingly. All persons wishing to speak to items on the agenda were required to register by 9 a.m. today. Any delegations received in written format have been provided to the members of the committee and will form part of the meeting record. In the event that there's a connection or service interruption that does affect quorum of the Committee of Adjustment, we may recess the meeting up to 15 minutes until we regain quorum. If quorum cannot be achieved, the meeting will be adjourned. So at this time, I'll just ask the clerk to take attendance.
Virginia Kershaw,
Here.
Tara Gaskin,
Here.
Chris Brooks,
Here.
thank you. Greg Kempa,
Here.
Dan Nemizniak,
Present. At this time, I'll ask if any of the committee members have any conflict of interest on any of the applications this evening. Okay, seeing none. I will read our typical procedures. So this meeting is held in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act. The purpose of this meeting is to discuss minor variance, consent, and severance applications, and to give the members of the public the opportunity to speak and ask questions, express concerns, or provide comment either in support or against the application. Each hearing is generally dealt with in accordance with the order that they appear on the agenda. In the event that the hearing is not completed on this date, it will be adjourned to a later date at which time the committee may hear further submissions. At the conclusion of each hearing, this committee will make a decision on the application. The names of those individuals who speak on any item tonight will appear within the meeting minutes. Anyone wishing further notice of any hearing, including a copy of the decision, please contact City Clerk's department. Minor variance decisions are final if there are no appeals 20 days after the committee's decision, and consent decisions are final if there are no appeals 20 days after the notice of the decision has been issued. So tonight's order of delegation, we will have the applicants or agent join us at the table, so to speak, where they will present details of the proposal. At that time, we'll have an opportunity for the committee to ask questions of the applicant or agent. Following the question period, we'll have staff join us to present the details of the report, followed by questions from the committee. At that time, I will open up the proposal or the application to the members of the public. So if there are any members of the public who have registered this evening, and I'll note now that there are no registered members on any of the applications, but I will confirm that as each item comes up, we'll open up the public portion, and then we will formally close the public portion. We'll have an opportunity for the final questions of clarification of staff or the applicant, and then we'll ask the committee to make a decision. So with that being said, we can move on to our first item on the agenda this evening. It is a consent and minor variance application B6 2020 and A8 2020 for 125 Sherwood Drive. I believe we have a whole team of applicants and agents there. So who's going to be the lead? If you want to raise your hand, Mr. Van Porten. So I will turn the mic over to you. If you want to just introduce yourself and your address for the record of the minutes, and then introduce your team, and then the floor is yours to present your proposal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Online, I see Bob Phillips and Jay Hitchon, and also the applicants, Rob Maltani. My name is Rob Van Porten. I'm from J.H. Cahoon Engineering Limited. Thank you for the opportunity to address the committee. The sole purpose of this severance and variance application is to facilitate the redevelopment of a late 1800s former heavy industrial site to an industrial condominium. The necessary environmental studies have been conducted, and rehabilitation of the bulk of the property to allow the repurposing of the site is ongoing. The purpose of this application is to sever a 0.15 hectare parcel of land determined not to be economically feasible to remediate. In order to obtain financing for the overall project, it is necessary to separate the subject severed parcel from the retained parcel. The subject severed parcel has a width of 20.3 meters and an overall area of 1520 square meters. While the industrial commercial zoning category requires that lots have a width of 30 meters and an area of 2,000 square meters, thereby requiring the variance application. The subject severed parcel is zone M1-17, and the only use that this parcel can be used for is a parking lot, and that's the only use for a parking lot for the retained and adjacent lands. By committee of adjustment consent or previous consent, an easement or right-of-way was established encapsulating the severed parcel, and the right-of-way was granting access to both the retained parcel and the adjacent parcel. And obviously that right-of-way is registered on the title of all affected properties. And that right-of-way obviously also assures that the only use of the severed parcel or that the severed parcel can be used for is access. There can be no bricks and mortar development on that parcel whatsoever. The creation of the driveway was established to provide access as intended. Therefore, the municipal consent and action to only use the severed and that severed parcel can be used for is a joint access authorized by both municipal zoning bylaw and committee of adjustment consent. Planning staff are recommending refusal of both the variance and severed application, noting non-compliance with the provincial policy statement and the official plan public health and safety objectives. The provincial policy in section 3.2 human-made hazard states. Sites with contaminants shall be assessed and remediated as necessary prior to any activity on the site associated with the proposed use. A curb driveway was established on the site 3 or 4 years ago in compliance with the municipal zoning bylaw and consent for the right-of-way. This driveway generally encapsulates the ground, so activity as defined in the PPS has already occurred on the land, and further activity cannot occur without further municipal consent by way of rezoning it to allow a brick and mortar development beyond the driveway. As noted by staff in section 6.2.12.1 of the official plan, that requires the rehabilitation of contaminated sites to encourage appropriate reuse opportunities. The only use the severed parcel can be used for are those authorized by zoning bylaw provisions, the parking lot, and by C of A establishment of the access easement. So therefore, there is no reuse opportunity. Staff also note the provision of section 5124 of the Planning Act regarding the size and shape of the proposed lot in comparison to other lots in the general area. By zoning of the parcel exclusively for parking and driveway purposes, and more importantly, the establishment of the access right-of-way, the municipality by default has dictated the size and shape of the parcel land. The parcel can be enlarged to meet the requirements of the zoning bylaw, and we in fact did put several proposals forward to ensure that the severed parcel did in fact meet the intent of the bylaw, and those were also rejected by planning staff. It should also be noted that the enlargement of the site has a major impact on other lands because they are in fact zoned for development. In other words, if you enlarge the parcel by the 10-meter lot width, it would then infringe on lands that actually are zoned for development purposes. The primary and only purpose of the application is to secure financing to complete the remediation and reuse of the brownfield site, which all planning documents encourage as being the appropriate form of development. And this application and the intent of the redevelopment, the applicant should be given credit for. It is a daunting process, as one can expect, to redevelop a brownfield site. The only way this can happen, however, is if the subject contaminated parcel is separated from the retained parcel in order to gain financial support for the project. Mr. Chair and members, this is the bulk of my submission. Mr. Phillips and Mr. Hitchon are available to either expand or respond to questions, as is the applicant and his agent. So with that, I can respond to planning questions, and the other gentleman can respond to other issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Van Porten. I hope I'm not the only committee member who has a difficulty following this type of application. It's not something we see all the time, or ever, perhaps, just given the justification provided for the severance. But I'll let Mr. Phillips continue the applicant's presentation, or Mr. Hitchon. Do you guys have anything else to add to the applicant's presentation?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to take the committee to the report and the diagrams that and aerials that are there, page 24 of 161 or 10 of the report. If you could turn to that. So that just generally locates the property we're talking about. And that is owned by the Multani Corporation. I'll call it Multani from here on if that's all right. And so we have that parcel of land and it extends all the way back as shown there. And the remediation is taking place with respect to the balance of the site and with respect to additional lands acquired from the municipality, which we'll show you. You can then turn the page, you can see what the proposed severance parcel looks like. That's on page 25. So up against the subject property, and it's there in the front. That's where the driveway is. Then you have the aerial photograph that follows at page 26, and you'll see that there. And also, if you go back to the building, which is the Multani building now, then you see the old shrub trees that are now actually been grubbed, and there'll be future development there. In order to support the remediation costs and the development, obviously the applicant has to obtain a mortgage. And the banks do not want to have a mortgage on any property that has any bit of contamination on it. And so in order to be able to provide the bank with a mortgage free of contamination, we would carve off this parcel and have it in a separate piece of land and put the mortgage on the balance. And that actually facilitates development. Over the page 27, if you haven't been by recently, this is what we're talking about. This is the entranceway, this is the driveway that we're just going to sever off and have the appropriate easements continue. And so the staff recommends refusal. And at page 7, they say the intent is to delay remediation. Well, that's certainly not the intent, as Mr. Van Porten has said, and as I have said, the purpose of this is to, in order to obtain financing to facilitate redevelopment of a brownfield site, and a brownfield site with heritage value that's over some 100 years old. And in our submission, the staff also says this will delay remediation indefinitely. With the greatest respect, it's already delayed indefinitely. As Mr. Van Porten pointed out, it is indeed a driveway entrance. The zoning only allows it to be a driveway. There is an easement in favor of others that are going to prevent development of this site. Should know there's no obligation on the applicant to remediate this parcel of industrially zoned land limited to a parking lot. And lastly, I'd say that suggest and submit to you that the environmentals are done, the remediation is taking place. There is going to be no adverse impact arising from the granting of this severance. Rather, it will, in our submission, facilitate development, which is a strong theme of the PPS, the growth plan, and your official plan. So that with the greatest respect, common sense, practical realities are already in place, and the granting of the severance in our submission will do no harm. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members. Bob? Yep.
No, I think you've summarized it well.
Thank you both for that explanation. I think that helps. I think that helps a little bit. Kind of explain the rationale behind the application. At this time, I'll ask if any committee members have any questions for the applicants or agents. Greg?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I think I understand the argument that says that the mortgage holder would not want to have this piece of property within their portfolio, knowing that some sort of remediation would have to take place that would affect the value of that land. Is the intent to carve it into a separate parcel so it could be sold off? Is there intention? Can you speak a bit to any plans you might have to remediate underneath that driveway? Or are we just looking to sever it off, leave the problem for whomever and however? Can you walk me through how that works?
There is no, sorry, it's Jay, there is no intent to sell off the property or develop it. It will be maintained as a driveway entrance to the Multani property and to the adjoining property. So no intent to do that. It would just be put in a separate ownership, so it could be charged. There is no immediate intent. I mean, it's just not economically feasible to do the remediation on a driveway. It adds no value. It sits there. Whereas if we remediate the balance of the site, we're going to develop that, and we're going to put additional development on the property, and you recoup your remediation costs through that. But the driveway sits there, and there's lots of parking lots in this municipality that have contamination underneath them. In our view, they don't prevent any sort of a health concern whatsoever when you see the picture of it being used as a driveway, and it's not a groundwater situation. So again, as I said before, there's no adverse impact, no harm in granting the severance in our view.
Again, through you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for that, Jay. Is it too easy to boil this down, and am I becoming overly simplistic in saying this is being driven by the bank or the financier? Is it that?
That's correct.
All right, thank you.
Correct. So that's entirely correct. We could get the financing, otherwise we wouldn't be making this application.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Chris?
Yes, I'm just wondering, do we know what was actually on that piece of property that's proposed to be severed? Like, do we know whether there were like tanks, like oil tanks, or any kind of building? Like, do we know what was there before?
I don't think we're aware of any specific details. Just through the testing that was or done on the property, it was indicated that this particular area was highly contaminated.
Do we know, like, from, like, say, borehole locations, what kind of contamination was there? Was it just on the whole site, or was there any particular boreholes on that piece that was proposed to be severed? Do we know what was there?
I'm going to defer that sort of question either to Rob Multani or AJ Kostick, his agent. Rob? You got to unmute yourself.
Yeah, just remind you to mute yourself if you want to be heard.
Sorry, this is AJ Kaushik. We don't particularly know exactly what type of contamination is in the area. Our environmental consultant has told us that further investigation and a lot of money would be required to do this further investigation to determine exactly what is in there. And since the area is being used as a driveway for a long period of time, we did not think it was necessary to spend that kind of money to even determine that much.
Do we know whether there's like services there? Like, is there sanitary and storm pipes underneath that driveway right now?
I don't believe there are any, sir. Rob?
Yeah, it's Rob Multani. Thanks, guys. I don't believe there's any sanitary or storm. They're actually coming in from a different part of the property, not this parking lot or not this driveway.
Okay, so basically there's nothing underneath the particular driveway that this portion is to be severed, and it's just strictly a driveway that's in order to contain any contamination. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. And access to our property and our adjacent property, our neighboring property owners. There's an easement on there for access for us to access our property and them to access their property.
Okay, all right, thank you. That's all my questions.
Any further questions from the committee to the applicants? I just have one. Obviously, drawing property lines are very accurate, defined boundaries. How can we confirm that this area of contamination will it be contained within this area, and then everything around it be remediated up to the property lines? Or is there a high concentration of contamination that is somewhere centrally located in this area that has been identified? Like, how do we know that it's contained within this severed parcel?
The delineation of the property to be severed was done in consultation with the environmental consultant. And he said that the appropriate boundary was this particular parcel of land. I believe he's prepared to even file a record of site conditions on the balance of the property. And maybe Rob, you can just confirm that. Yes, okay, so that was my understanding as well, that ultimately he was going to file a record of site conditions on the balance of the land.
Yes, that's correct, Bob.
Okay, great, thank you. Any further questions from the committee? Okay, with that being said, we will invite staff and listen to the details of the proposal and the recommendation. Sean, welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Planning staff have received a consent and minor variance application for 125 Sherwood Drive. These applications were previously deferred from the June meeting. Next slide. Subject lands are located on the north side of Sherwood Drive, west of Catherine Avenue, have an area of approximately 2 hectares. The subject lands have 2 official plan designations, mixed industrial, commercial, and general industrial, and are subject to 3 modified policy areas, 112, 113, and 119. The lands are located in the flood industrial commercial zone and contain 3 special exception areas, 16, 17, and 19. Next slide. Subject lands, or the lands are occupied by an industrial mall comprised of a mix of commercial and industrial uses. The existing building extends onto the neighboring property northeast and is separated by a firewall. Next slide. And next slide. The applicant is proposing to sever a 1,520 square meter parcel with a lot width of 20.3 meters from the southeastern portion of the property abutting Sherwood Drive. The severed parcel is to remain vacant and continue to be used as a driveway access to the retained lands and neighboring lands. The severance requires approval of a minor variance to permit a minimum lot area of 0.15 hectares, whereas 2.2 is required, and a minimum lot width of 20.3 meters, whereas 30 meters is required. So regarding the consent application, the Planning Act sets the standards to which provincial and local interests, policies, and goals are implemented, including that planning decisions shall be consistent with policy statements, This includes the growth plan. The subject lands are considered a brownfield site, and section 2.1 of the growth plan specifically calls for these sites to be the focus of growth and encourages redevelopment. By severing the contaminated parcel in order to avoid remediation, it's unlikely that the severed property would be redeveloped in the future. Section 5124 of the Planning Act lists criteria considering the consent, lists criteria to consider for consent applications. This includes the dimensions and shapes of the proposed lots and if the plan conforms to the official plan. Section 26212.1 of the official plan lists public health and safety objectives, which includes promoting the rehabilitation of contaminated sites and encouraging appropriate reuse opportunities. The consent application would delay the rehabilitation of the severed lands indefinitely, which are contaminated. Due to the above reasons, planning staff are of the opinion that the general intent and purpose of the official plan is not maintained by the consent application. Previous slide. The Committee of Adjustment must also be satisfied that the 4 tests of section 45 of the Planning Act have been maintained. To be recommended for approval, a minor variance must maintain the general intent and purpose of the official plan and zoning bylaw, be minor in nature and desirable for the appropriate development and use of the land. The variances are not minor in nature as they are facilitating the creation of a lot that is intended to delay the remediation of the lands indefinitely. They're not appropriate for the appropriate and future development or use of the land as they facilitate the creation of an undersized lot that is not suitable for development. The general intent of the minimum lot width and area provisions of the M1 zone are to ensure that newly created lots are large enough to accommodate appropriately sized industrial and commercial uses. The proposed lot area of 0.15 hectares is not adequate for future industrial and commercial development and does not maintain the general intent of the zoning bylaw. Section 1811 of the official plan also lists criteria to evaluate minor variances. In addition to the 4 tests, this includes if the lot size is keeping with adjacent development. There are no industrial commercial lots of this size in the immediate area, and it's planning staff's opinion that the proposed minor variances do not meet the general intent of the official plan. I note that the applicant has presented various options of lot sizes that would not require a minor variance. However, this would still be facilitating the creation of a contaminated property with no plans to remediate it. Next slide. The application was circulated to all property owners within 60 meters, and 1 resident did express concerns. And just to speak to the member's question regarding what types of contaminants are contained in the property, the applicant did submit an environmental assessment brief with the application. And for the severed lands, it does go into some detail about what's there. It says, just reading from the brief, subsurface contamination, which was delineated and characterized by the presence of a dense non-aqueous phase liquid in soil and groundwater below 3.7 meters, and exceedances of pH and PHC constituents and representatives analyzed soil samples was identified within the limits of Part 6 lands. Part 6 are the severed lands, so just to clear that up, and maybe the applicant can expand on what some of those acronyms stand for. One further concern that staff had raised that's not included in the report was that, if we create this lot somewhere down the road, if it falls into arrears, it could potentially fall into the hands of the city again, and then the city would be left with this contaminated piece of property. So in closing, given the foregoing, staff do recommend that applications B06-2020 and A08-2020 be refused. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Sean. Do I have any questions from the committee? Greg, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And to staff. Can you walk me through the process that suggests that this parcel of land can only be used for a driveway and parking lot?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the lands are zoned M117, and that zoning does permit only the use of a parking lot, but that's in association with the adjacent piece of property, which was previously zoned for another use that was never actually fully realized. Sometimes when there's, if people are trying to get a mortgage on only part of the property, they'll go through another planning application, which we would consider to be more appropriate in this instance, which would be the partial discharge of a mortgage. And that's how you can, charge only a certain portion of the lands. We recommended this to the applicants, but their response was that they did pitch this to their lender, but they still wouldn't entertain it.
Any further questions from the committee to staff? Okay. So if there are no questions further to staff, I'll formally open and close the public portion. So I'll note that no members of the public have registered this evening to speak to this application, noting that Sean had received some correspondence from a resident with some questions, comments that have been clarified already. So I will formally close the public portion, and I'll ask the committee if they have any further questions of clarification to the applicants or agent. And if there are no further questions of clarification, I'll ask for a motion to be put on the floor, which we can certainly discuss amongst the committee. Before we throw a motion up, I'll just ask if the applicants have any further comments or items that they'd like to speak to before going to a motion.
I believe that there's a little possibility that the only entranceway to two properties is going to fall into arrears of municipal taxes. To be, again, practical and realistic, I mean, if the city took this over, you'd be shutting off access to the two developments, certainly the Multani development. So there's little likelihood of that occurring, and I don't think there's anything further we can add at this time. It is driven by the banks. The banks didn't like the idea of a partial discharge because they would have been at one time a mortgagee of the property. So they again pushed us to carve this off, and that's why we're here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I just have just one question of clarification to the Multani, to Van Porten, Phillips, or Hitch, on whoever's willing to take it on. The page 6 of the report, or page 12 of 161, identifies with the two options where you propose to add additional lands to the severed lands to meet the minimum requirements. Both concepts identify the lands, the abutting parcel to the east as proposed commercial, Are there any plans? I know it's not part of the subject lands, but are there plans in the works for those lands? Are there opportunities for that development to utilize this? What would become a defined access parcel? Are there any opportunities to also utilize that, the severed parcel as shared access?
The proposed commercial is actually on lands not owned by the Multanys. It's on the neighboring property, so I can't really speak to, that proposed use on the property. We were just trying to outline some options about increasing the size of the severed parcel without support from planning.
Yep, understood. So I guess consider that question a suggestion that any future commercial development perhaps can utilize, if you're successful, can utilize that access, since it would be a dedicated access easement.
Received.
I
Any
think
further?
it's already there, though.
The access already exists, correct?
And so does the legal right-of-way to the adjoining lands.
Okay, noted. I just noted there's some development potential, future development that could also possibly utilize that existing driveway.
I think the driveway is always going to be a driveway, and it's always going to be accessed to the retained parcel of land, which, yes, the development proposal will come forward in the form of an industrial condominium on those lands. So these lands will always be utilized. I don't think they'll always be sterilized or just left. It's always going to be a driveway or include parking.
Yep, understood. I'm just trying to justify it and perhaps give it more purpose in the future. Any further questions from the committee?
Just if I could just add that,
go ahead.
excuse me, Mr. Chairman, sorry to interrupt. I think you were speaking of the proposed commercial. That's on the adjoining property, which enjoys that right. So it will facilitate development of the commercial property as well, because there's an easement. There's already an easement. And once again, nothing is really going to change here except the legal ownership.
Okay, any final questions?
Thank you.
Clarification? Sean, did you have some final comments?
Yes, I just wanted, through you, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to respond to Mr. Hitchon's statement about, these lands need to be used for access for the retained lands regardless. And so for that reason, they wouldn't the property would go into arrears. They want to, maintain taxes. But just to clarify, there are easements on title on this property that would ensure that access regardless of if the property fell into arrears or not. And also, I just want the committee, just so everyone's aware, that the application is not just for the lot creation, but Mr. Phillips included in the application hydro easement and access easement and easements of those nature for the in favor of the retained lands. So just so that's clear, if it wasn't in the report.
Okay. Greg?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to staff. It's my understanding if there's an easement on it, that means by definition, nothing can be built on that piece of property. Is that correct?
That's correct. They would need, not that nothing could ever be built, they would need agreements from all parties to that easement to remove it from title, in which case they could then build on it. Go ahead.
Let me make sure I understand this, because I may be back to oversimplifying it. We've created a piece of land here that at this point in time can only be used as a driveway. there or parking. At this point in time, it is but one of only two ways to get in there. That zoning requires that it will always be a driveway or a parking lot. And what I understand staff's position is that it's too small to be sold off to be developed into anything other than a driveway. Right?
I wouldn't, through you, Mr. Chair. I don't know if we would say it's, so to clarify, your question was that, is it staff's position that the severed land is too small to ever be sold off to be developed in the future?
Yeah, is that one of your objections to the proposal?
Yes, the application that submitted was for, you know, an undersized property.
Okay, so I guess I'm trying to play a little bit of devil's advocate here. We've got a piece of property that is too small to be developed, that chances are it would cost so much to be redeveloped because of the remuneration. Sorry, making the soil right again. There's an easement on it, which would get in the way of redeveloping it. There is zoning already in place that says it can't be anything or shouldn't be anything that it already is. And we've got different stakeholders holding an easement on that so that it shouldn't be anything other than it is. The staff is still refusing to grant this going forward because of all those things that don't seem likely to change in either the short term or the long term.
If I could, hi, it's Nicole Patino. I'm acting manager on behalf of Joe Muto. So I just wanted to sort of address a couple of issues. They're creating a parcel that can't be developed. So that's a creation of their application. So if the parcel were larger, and even it doesn't matter what it's zoned, because whenever someone buys a property, they likely would rezone the property anyway. And in fact, if someone could develop it, they could remediate just as though these people are remediating their portion of the land. So if the parcel were larger and they were severing off a larger developable parcel of land, you know, I don't know necessarily if that would be more palatable from a planning perspective. However, it could be developed in the future, therefore remediated in the future. But they're creating this very, very small portion of land that will, by definition of its size, will not be able to be developed, not be able to be remediated, and therefore will always remain contaminated. So why would we want to create a parcel in the city that is going to remain contaminated and contaminate the groundwater when there's an opportunity as a whole for this property to be actually remediated in its entirety? So to say that they'll keep it for access, it's going to be under separate ownership. So, you know, when something's under separate ownership, they could dissolve those easements, no problem. They're technically the same owners. So they can dissolve those on title easements, no issue with that. There are alternative access. If they needed the alternative access, they have that ability. So the fear really is, I mean, there's the Planning Act and there's the growth plan and there's all of the planning rationale that we've laid out in the report. But I think the fear is, and I know that other municipalities have had this situation as well, is if you create a parcel that's not developable, it's not going to be picked up by anybody else in the future. It could potentially go in arrears for their taxes and the city could end up with that land. So, you know, just that the committee, and not to say that this particular applicant would do that, but you're creating this situation by allowing the severance. So just to be aware that that is a potential and that there's no reason, I understand the bank doesn't want to touch the whole property is contaminated. So the bank, I'm not sure why this little tiny portion in relation to the larger portion can't also be remediated. So I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole, for the planning insight. Any further discussion amongst the committee or, sorry, questions or clarification? I'm seeing none. I'll ask the committee to put a motion on the floor and we can discuss it.
Mr. Chair, I would make sure I got the wording right here. I'd be happy to move that. My mouse doesn't work as fast. Sorry. Application B 06-220 and A08 stroke 2020 for 125 Sherwood Drive be refused as shown in the agenda. Seeking a second.
Do I have a seconder on that motion? Virginia? And any discussion on the motion as you see it there on your screen? So the motion is exactly how it is laid out in the staff report, including, assuming you're agreeing with the reasons that have been outlined in the report as well, Greg?
Correct.
Any discussion on this motion?
And I'll suggest to the committee that for the purpose of discussion, I was kind of going back and forth on this a little bit. But essentially what it came down to for me is what was what Nicole said, that we are creating a problem. We're going to leave this one little isolated piece of land in here that will forever be in a state of required repair without doing anything about it. And I appreciate that it puts the applicants in a bit of a situation where they may need to be a little bit more creative in where those lines go, or maybe in how that's being developed, so as to be able to get at that and make it right. But with the amount of brown space that's going on within the city now, if we've got a chance to clean up a little bit, why don't we ask that be done? Thank you.
Sean, did you have a comment?
I just wanted to clarify the motion as read in the agenda. The agenda did not contain the language of that the application was also for a hydro easement, an access easement. I have included that language in the actual decision. Just wanted to make sure committee's clear about that. I'm happy to, I'm going to send Julia the wording right now. Maybe she can update it live.
Sean, was this copy of the public notice, did that include the request for the additional easements?
Mr. Chair, I'd have to look over the file about that, but I'm just going to send Julia over that wording now and I'll let you know.
Okay, I think I'd be interested to know what information was circulated to the public.
Chair,
Go ahead, Virginia.
while we're waiting to see that, is there somewhere in the staff report that we can read about these easements? Like, this is just new to us now. So is there a section within the staff report that talks about them?
Just checking in with staff. Did you have an opportunity to review the notice and identify the specifics of the easement in the report?
Sean, are you available to address the committee's concerns with respect to the easements?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm just looking in the report right now. I know there was, within the technical comments, section 6.1, there was some discussion about property access and easements over the severed lands and in favor of the retained lands. I'm just trying to find the section of the report if it mentions the hydro easement that the applicant specifically applied for.
Mr. Phillips, can you, or Mr. Van Porten, can you confirm if the easements were like a written original request as part of the application, or if it's something that came kind of after the circulation or partway through?
Mr. Chairman, I believe the access easement presently exists on the property, as does the hydro easement. I don't think it was a formal request from us. It was a simple severance and minor variance.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So, Mr. Phillips, so those exist. They're not part of this application.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
The easements exist and were created by the city when the entire property got severed into two, approximately a year to 18 months ago.
Okay, so that previous consent was for easement for access as well as hydro.
I believe it was.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so then that's good news in terms of details and avoiding any issues with adequate notice. Sean, I'll just ask for you to confirm, is there any additional wording that's needed with that being determined that the easements exist? Are there any changes to the wording as we see it in the report?
To you, Mr. Chair, no, with Mr. Phillips' confirmation that the easements are in place and the wording is fine.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for helping sort that one out. So again, we have a motion on the floor. We've had a bit of discussion on that. Are there any further discussion on this motion? If there's no further discussion, I will call a vote. Again, this will be a recorded vote. When the clerk calls the question, you'll raise your hand and keep it raised until your name is called.
All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand and leave it raised until your name is called. Tara Gaskin, Chris Brooks, Greg Kempa, Dan Nemizniak, Virginia Kershaw. The motion is approved, so the motion to refuse the applications carried unanimously on a recorded vote.
Okay, thank you guys for participating and joining. I'm sure you will be in touch with staff. We'll move on to the next item on
Thank
the
you.
agenda. The next item on the agenda is a minor variance application for 57 Kennedy Street. I'll just ask if
Ready,
the,
Mr.
oh, you're here. The agent is here.
Yes.
The
Thank
floor
you,
is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is an application at 57 Kennedy Street to permit an exterior side yard of 1.4 meters, whereas the bylaw requires 3 meters. And to permit a set of stairs to go up to the front door, which also involves an encroachment into the required front yard. It's a set of stairs. I would consider it more landscaping, but it was identified as needing a variance. This particular lot is on the south side of Kennedy Street as it goes up the hill. And it was a subject of a previous severance application. The owner is desirous of just building a slightly wider house. On the west side of this is an unopened road allowance, but still considered a road allowance, which necessitated the variance on the exterior side yard, which is basically a heavily treed lot. We've read the planning staff report and are supportive of the recommendations, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have regarding this one.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Any questions from the committee to the agent? Seeing none, I'll invite staff in to present the staff recommendation.
Chair, members of the committee, planning staff have received an application for minor variance for 57 Kennedy Street. Next slide. The lands are located on the south side of Kennedy Street, west of West Street and east of Sydenham Street. The lot was recently severed from the lot adjacent at 59 Kennedy Street. The lands are designated low-density residential area in the official plan and zoned residential type 1C zone in the zoning bylaw 16090. Next slide. Here is an image of the lands, and it illustrates the grading of the land. Next slide. And here's an image of the Wesley Street or Wesley Avenue right of way at Kennedy Street. Next slide. The applicant is proposing a single detached dwelling on the property. At the time of the severance application, the layout and design of the single detached dwelling was not yet considered and no variances were applied for. To facilitate the development as proposed, the applicant is seeking relief from the following sections of the zoning bylaw. Section 7.4.2.1.2 to permit an exterior side yard of 1.4 meters, whereas 3 meters is required, and section 6.4.1.1 to permit an exterior staircase within the required front yard encroaching 2.9 meters, whereas the exterior staircases are permitted to encroach 1.5 meters into rear and side yards, provided they are no closer than 1.2 meters from the lot line. In order for a minor variance application to be approved, an application must meet the 4 tests of Section 45 of the Planning Act. The minor variance application is minor in nature, as it is not expected to have any adverse impact on the adjacent properties or the road allowance. The minor variances are desirable and appropriate for the development and use of the lands, as it will permit the development of an infill single detached dwelling that will be approved through site plan control. The intent of the minimum exterior side yard regulation in the zoning bylaw is to ensure that there is sufficient separation for maintenance around the entire building, access to the rear yard, and to maintain sightlines for vehicular and pedestrian safety. Planning staff are of the opinion that the proposed variance will not impact sightlines and is sufficient in providing access. For committee's information, at the time of the consent application, a daylight triangle was taken at the corner of this road allowance, Wesley Avenue and Kennedy Street. The applicant is also proposing an exterior staircase within the required front yard in order to address the significant grading on the site. Planning staff are of the opinion that the proposed staircase will not negatively impact the front yard and that the intent of the zoning bylaw and the official plan are maintained. Planning staff recommend that for these reasons, planning staff recommend that application A06-2020 be approved. Thank you, and I can answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the committee to staff? Seeing none. Okay. At this time, I will formally open and close the public portion of the application as there have been no public members of the public registered to speak on this application. So the public portion is formally closed. I'll ask the committee if there's any form or further questions of clarification from the applicants or staff. And if there are no further questions, I'll ask the committee if they're ready to make a motion. Virginia?
Sorry, I can't find my raise hand button. I don't know where it's gone, but I'll move that application A06-2020 requesting various changes or adjustments be approved as noted in the agenda. Thanks.
Do I have a seconder, Greg? Any discussion on the motion as we see it in the report and as we see it on the screen? No discussion. We will call the recorded vote.
All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand and leave it raised until I've called your name. Tara Gaskin, Chris Brooks, Greg Kempa, Dan Namizniak, Virginia Kershaw. Item 3.2 is approved unanimously on a recorded vote.
All right, moving
Thank
on to the next application, a consent application B7 for 7, 33, and 43 Erie Ave and 100 100 Market Street South. The agent, JH Cahoon Engineering. Are you guys solo tonight, or are the applicant joining you as well?
I believe the owner is on the call
Okay.
as well. This is a technical severance. The owner has purchased and obtained the entire block, and through some legal matters, the property was merged. So this application was to reestablish the original boundaries of the property to facilitate development of a large condominium project, which is proceeding through the site plan approval process. Just to make everyone familiar, this is used to be the old CAW hall located across from the TH&B station, across from the Brantford Casino. I hope that puts it in a little bit of context. But as I mentioned, this is an application so that the development on the corner parcel of land can proceed as they reach site plan approval, hopefully in the very near future. We've read the planning staff report. And another part of this application is to create some off-site parking on the abutting lands. It's an easement for parking, which is permitted under the zoning bylaw, and has been kind of vented through the site plan approval process. In summary, yes, we've read the planning staff report and the conditions that have been included in it, and are supportive of those conditions. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Any further questions of the applicant or agent from the committee? Seeing none, I'll invite staff in to present the details of the report and the recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the committee, planning staff received the consent application for 7, 33, and 43 Erie Avenue and 100 Market Street South. The subject lands are bound by Erie Avenue, Market Street South, and Veterans Memorial Parkway. The lands are designated core commercial in the official plan and zoned flood core commercial in zoning bylaw 16090. Next slide. The lands currently contain the Brantford Convention Center, a vacant gas station, and a vacant one-story block building. A two-story block building was recently demolished at 7 Erie Avenue. Next slide. The consent application is to recreate the original holding for 7 Erie Avenue at the northwest portion of the site. And the application also seeks to create parking and access easements for 31 off-street parking spaces on the retained lands in favor of the severed lands, and that those easements were included in the public notice. Next slide. The consent will facilitate the construction of an 8-story mixed-use building with 96 residential units and 2 ground floor commercial units on the severed lands. The site plan application for this proposal has been conditionally approved. The consent application is for the purpose of recreating a lot that had previously existed prior to the owner consolidating it with the adjacent properties in 2018. And the proposed lot area and width can accommodate the development that has already received conditional site plan approval. The consolidation of properties carried with it significant impacts to the site plan control process. Namely, it impacts servicing to the property, as city policy only permits 1 sanitary and water service per property. So if this gets approved, then the proposed development can be serviced independently, and that is a requirement for final site plan approval. Regarding the archaeology condition that staff have included, the results of the archaeological pilot project do indicate that the subject property has the potential to contain archaeological resources, and the proposed development and site alteration may impact archaeological resources on the property. We've also received comments from the 6 Nations of the Grand River requesting this condition as well. So planning staff do recommend that archaeological clearance for just the severed parcel, clearance for the retained lands would be required when a planning application comes in for those. But we do require that clearance as a condition of approval. In closing, having regard for section 5124 of the Planning Act, we're satisfied that the application is desirable and compatible with the surrounding area, and recommend that application B07-2020 be approved. Thank you. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Sean. Any questions from the committee to staff? I see no questions. I will open up the public portion of the item here and note that no public or members of the public have registered to speak this evening. So with that being said, I'll formally close the public portion of the hearing. I'll ask at this time if the committee members have any further questions of clarification. I see no hands. I'll ask if the committee is prepared to move a motion. Chris?
Yes, I am moving application B07-2020 be approved as noted in the planning report. Seeing as this is my first motion, I hope I did it correctly.
You did well. We're flexible.
Okay, thanks.
Seconder, Greg. So any discussions on the motion as we see it up on the screen and in the report? No discussion? Okay, so we will call a recorded vote.
All those in favor of the motion before you, please raise your hands and leave it raised until you've heard your name called. Tara Gaskin, Chris Brooks, Greg Kempa, Dan Nemizniak, Virginia Kershaw. Thank you. The motion is carried unanimously on a recorded vote.
Thank you.
No problem. Oh, you're here for the next one too? The next application, consent application B8 2020, the agent JH Cahoon Engineering. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I'm the lead. Bob is there. This application is kind of unique, but I first have to apologize to the committee and staff. I think I've been continually referring to the lot being created in 2010 when in fact it was created in 2012. And that date is important throughout my presentation. The original lot was created in 2012 and involves the creation of 5 residential lots on the former Fairview Heights or Farringdon Heights school site on Mount Pleasant Road at the top of the Farringdon Hill, opposite Farringdon Church and Cemetery. There was a desire by the owner of the abutting property, that rather large 27,000 square meter parcel, to purchase lot 5 and merge it with her property. And I think if you refer to page 80 of 161 or page 9 of the report, I think this becomes rather clear. That plan, which is an aerial photograph, identifies the 5 lots that were created in 2012. The 4 lots, the northern 4 lots were created and single detached dwellings, I think, are now located on all those. Lot 5 is the lot in question, and it was in fact merged with the adjacent property. And as a condition of the original 2012 severance, there was a condition that that lot 5 be merged and titled with the adjacent property. We're now in a position that we want to, if there is such a word, unmerge these lots. An application has been submitted to recreate, I guess, the original lot 5 and its original size and conformation. These lots, I have to go back. These lots, the 5 lots, were created under the jurisdiction of the County of Brant. These parcels or this land was part of the annexation or recent annexation. As I said, the subject application in essence requests that the original 2012 severance be undone and allow lot 5 to be stand on its own and be developed for residential purposes. The subject parcel and the general area is designated suburban residential and zoned suburban residential by the county zoning, our official plan zoning bylaw. The sections that were annexed are now administered by the city of Brantford. The front portion is designated as zoned suburban residential. The back portion of the property, because of its slope nature going back down to the Grand River, is designated natural heritage. and obviously can't be built on by both official plan zoning bylaw provisions. We appreciate the positive feedback from planning staff and the recommendation for approval. We do know, however, that there are 3 conditions which we would like reconsidered by this committee. The first condition is condition 1. At the time of the creation of the original lots in 2012, there was a reference plan created for the 5 individual lots, and the reference plan was deposited as required under the conditions of approval of the creation of those lots. The condition 1 requires a reference plan for both the severed and retained parcel. In my mind, there is absolutely no reason for the municipality requiring a reference plan on the retained parcel. It is not a newly created lot, and you can appreciate, because of the size, that it would entail a considerable amount of cost to get that severed. And as I said, the municipality would have no need for a reference plan for the retained parcel. That's the larger parcel. So we request that this condition either be modified to remove the requirement for a reference plan for the retained parcel, or just dropped, because in fact there's already a reference plan on lot 5, or the severed parcel. We also have concern of condition 6, which requests the road widening for not only the severed parcel, which already has been dedicated, by the way, but also the retained parcel. It is not illegal to assign conditions to retained parcel, but it is highly unusual. And you have to note and appreciate that the road widening may be in the order of something like 2 meters. And with this extensive lot frontage, the municipality would in fact be taking something in the order of 2,000 square feet of land at no cost. And I believe that to be an unreasonable request. You also have to consider that there are 3 rather substantial entrance features on the retained parcel. Brick, I think they're brick and mortar. Planters, as I said, they're substantial. They would either be totally within the road widening requirement or partially within the road widening requirement. And they in fact would be under the ownership of the city. And they would be responsible for the maintenance of them and also the liability of the of those structures. And that's something I'm not certain was considered by the municipality when it requested that condition. And therefore I request that the condition only apply to the severed parcel or be removed. And as I said, the severed parcel already dedicated a road widening in 2012 severance. The other condition which we have a concern about is the request of condition 8 requires that an archaeological study be done. The official plan of the County of Brant was adopted in September of 2010 by bylaw. It was approved by the ministry, I believe, about mid-year of 2012. But the operative date is September of 2010. That is when the municipality adopted the zoning or the official plan. That official plan contains the map. I think it's Appendix 1, which identifies the archaeological probable sites. And the municipality, or the County of Brant, the planning authority of the County of Brant, when it considered the 5 lots, did not attach conditions in respect to archaeological requirements. And if in fact those requirements were contained in the 2010 document, which which I believe they may have, then the county certainly must have regard to that requirement. And they in fact did not require that. I can only surmise why it was not included, and that was perhaps because of the extensive amount of development that these lots, these 5 lots entailed: school, schoolyard, you know, et cetera, et cetera. But that would only be an assumption on my part. I certainly did the severances back in 2012 while it was under the county, and for the life of me, I can't remember why that was not considered, or if in fact it should have been considered. Mr. Chair and members, we are happy with, I guess, I guess because I commented on the archaeological condition, we would request that this condition be waived, because in fact, the lot was already created once. And if I can use an American term, it's probably double jeopardy that you look at it twice, and because something may not have been done the first time, you do it the second time. I don't know whether that is particularly fair. Mr. Chair, we are happy with the other conditions, other, as I said, other than those conditions that the 3 conditions I mentioned. I can respond to questions and clarify anything that I may have missed.
Thanks, Rob. Any questions from the committee to the agents? Just want to run through the conditions, the revisions that you are requesting. So the first one related to the reference plan. So you feel that you have a reference plan that could be utilized to reestablish this lot?
We have a reference plan. There was a reference plan prepared for all 5 lots.
Yeah.
And that reference plan was deposited. So
Yeah.
yes, we have a description for lot 5.
Okay. Would you accept the added wording if required, so that we can allow the flexibility there?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so that will allow staff to kind of go through the motion.
Provided there's no requirement for a reference plan on the retained parcel.
Right, okay, so we'll let that be a topic of discussion when we get to a motion.
Understood.
And then the road widening, so it's already been taken on the severed lands, and you are challenging the request to take it on the retained lands.
I think that request is fairly extensive for a residential lot, absolutely.
Okay.
And there's no new lot being created on the retained parcel.
Okay. And then, yeah, the last one's pretty straightforward. So it wasn't requested at the time of the creation of the 5 lots.
That's correct.
Most likely should have, if those 5 lots were being severed today, there's no doubt that archaeological would be a requirement given the proximity to the river.
Understood, and I'd be the first to admit that it's identified in the official plan. However, as I indicated, I truly believe, unless Mr. House can clarify, I truly believe that the 2010 official plan, if it contained the archaeological requirements, the county should have had regard to it at that time, and it wasn't included.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so we will keep these requests in mind as we listen to staff and discuss the motion. Any further questions of the applicants? And just one more before I send it off. So you don't have an opportunity to utilize that original deed to reestablish this lot, or the original certificate that was stamped?
I wish I did.
Yeah.
We wouldn't be here. No, evidence has been provided to the city that in fact the properties had merged. And that was a requirement of the creation of lot 5.
Okay.
That had been merged.
Okay. So if there's nothing else, I'll invite Sean to present the staff recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Planning staff received the consent application for 298 to 310 Mount Pleasant Road. The subject lands are located on the east side of Mount Pleasant Road. Next slide. The severed lands are currently vacant as shown on this slide and the next slide. And the retained lands contain a single detached dwelling and several accessory buildings at 310 Mount Pleasant Road. Next slide. This is just the rear portion of the severed lands. Next slide. The applicant is proposing to sever one new lot and retain the existing dwelling and remnant land. The proposed severed lands were originally one lot and a 5-lot severance previously approved by the County of Brant in 2012. And as Mr. Van Porten explained, the lot was merged with the retained lands. So the applicant is seeking to recreate this lot. As the subject lands were formerly in the County of Brant, the county zoning bylaw and official plan still apply to the property. The front portion of the severed lands is designated suburban residential, and the rear portion designated natural heritage systems in the official plan. Likewise, the subject lands are dual zoned suburban residential and natural heritage under the County of Brant zoning bylaw 6116. The proposed severance will allow for the development of a new single detached dwelling, which will require a private septic system in connection to the existing County of Brant water service. Partial servicing is permitted in this area as set out in section 5.233 of the county's official plan. While a portion of the severed lands are non-developable due to its natural heritage designation, there does remain adequate area in the suburban residential designation and zone to develop a permitted use. The severed lot will also be subject to site plan control, which will provide the city with an opportunity to review technical details of the development. As Mr. Van Porten alluded to, the subject lands are located in an area of archaeological potential as identified in Appendix 1 of the County of Brant official plan. So to ensure that our potential archaeological resources are conserved in accordance with provincial and municipal policy, planning staff recommend that archaeological clearance for the severed parcel be submitted by the applicant as a condition of approval. And just to speak to some of Mr. Van Porten's points about when the county of official plan was in effect, it actually wasn't approved by the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing until August 2012, which was, after that previous severance application was considered. I can't speak for the committee's reasoning for not including it at that time, but that may be in fact a reason that it wasn't in effect and approved by the Ministry of Municipal Affairs. As the applicant mentioned, we've also included a condition that a road widening be dedicated to the city. And to clarify, this would only apply to the retained lands. The widening was taken from the severed lands with that previous application. So we just be, continuing that line down Mount Pleasant Road for the retained lands. Just to clarify that, so that the city is not at any liability, we require that these lands are dedicated free and clear of any encumbrances. So the structures that Mr. Van Porten mentions would, need to be moved off of that land that would be dedicated. Section 5125 of the Planning Act and Section 5.3.21 of the County of Brant do encourage road widenings where required to be taken as a condition of consent, and the act nor the official plan distinguish between severed and retained lands. To close, planning staff have given given regard for section 5124 of the Planning Act and are satisfied that the application is desirable and compatible with the surrounding area, and do recommend that application B8 2020 be approved, however, subject to the conditions contained in the report. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Sean. Any questions from the committee to staff?
Oh, and just to clarify, we do have one of our long-range planners here who does deal with our archaeology portfolio. So Patrick Vusier is also here to answer any specific questions you might have about that.
Okay, perfect. Any questions from committee to staff? Virginia?
I just had one. Sean, did you touch on Mr. Van Porten's request to only do the registered reference plan for the severance lands if it's available? I can't recall if you mentioned that just now.
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, to the member, I didn't touch on that. To clarify that, the reference plan is mainly for the road widening condition. If that condition wasn't there, we would likely be able to rely on the existing reference plan.
Okay, so that's fair. Just to clarify, you'd be asking for, I guess, an additional reference plan would have to be updated or prepared, identifying the limits of the road widening requested across the frontage of the retained land. That would have to be a new reference plan.
That is correct.
Okay. Any further questions of staff? Okay. Seeing none, we'll go to the public portion of the meeting. I'll just note that there have been no public registrants who have registered this evening, so I will open and close the public portion. I'll ask at this time if the committee has any further questions or clarification to the applicants or to staff, or perhaps our long-range planner, Patrick. We'll go Virginia first, and then we'll have Mr. Van Porten speak.
Do we know when or if road widening of that section of the road is going to happen? Is planning aware of anything in the works for the master transportation plan, perhaps?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the member, I'm not aware of an exact date of when that road widening would occur.
So through you, Mr. Chair, I know that the master servicing plan is in conjunction with the new official plan. So they're still working on the finalization of the master servicing plan. So of course, that's going to be some time out, but so the road widening would be, I imagine, incorporated into that at some point in time if there's revisions happening as these applications are coming in. But there's no, yeah, like Sean said, there's no date per se to do that.
Okay, Mr. Van Porten.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Am I live or?
We
We're
can
good?
hear you. Yep.
Okay. A couple of things. Mr. House indicated that quite correctly that the ministry approved the official plan in August of 2012 after the severance was granted in January, I think January 2012. So Certainly, the approval by the ministry was later. However, the approval by bylaw of the official plan by the municipality predated the severance by about a year and a half. So, you know, from my standpoint, I believe the municipality must have regard to not only the old official plan, but the new official plan, the one that was adopted by the municipal bylaw. And therefore, if the provision of the archaeological was in the new bylaw, they should have had regard to that. In respect to the road, I'm thinking the section of Pleasant or Mount Pleasant Road was reconstructed fairly recently, repaved anyways in that area. And I'm just trying to rack my brains, but I believe that was the case. And in respect to widening, as I indicated, you know, we're talking about 2,000 square feet, whereas a considerable amount, number one. Number two, now the city is saying, well, yeah, all those structures that are on there should be removed at the cost of the applicant. These are fairly onerous requirements, and number one. Number two, have an impact on the value of the property if entrance features are required to be removed. Mr. Chair, I think I outlined the reasons why I believe the three conditions that I commented on should be changed, and I can regurgitate that, but I believe, Mr. Chair, you and I outlined them correctly. Thank you.
Chris?
I just want to make sure that, is it standard practice for us to ask for a road allowance on the remaining portion of a severed piece of property?
If you're asking me, I'm a consultant. I certainly have a little bit of experience at the Committee of Adjustment for the city, and certainly I do not recall that as being the norm. I believe, you know, I've always taken the position that condition should be tied to the creation of the lot, not the retained parcel. However, as I said, I don't work for the municipality anymore, so.
Okay. So maybe.
I mean, Mr. House can probably expand on what is the current practice.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, to the member. Our current direction is to request road windings for both the severed and retained lands. We feel it's in the public interest to gain these lands through these types of applications for, you know, when the road widening is eventually taken, so that, you know, the city's not having to purchase these lands in the future at the cost of taxpayers.
Yeah, thank you. That was my next question, because my understanding is if we didn't ask for the road widening now and we didn't take the road widening, and sometime in the future it was deemed, say in the master transportation plan, that we needed to widen the road, if the road widening hadn't been taken now, that means the city has to buy this widening, or the portion that would have had to be widened. So it would be on the city's dime for us to have to pay for a widening. Is that correct?
That's correct as far as I understand. I'm not involved with the public works departments when it comes to, you know, purchasing these lands for road windings, but I believe that's the practice. And just to clarify about the applicant's comment about, you know, if the official plan was or wasn't in effect with the previous application, I do just want to remind committee members it's we're kind of making decisions based on current policy and how that's interpreted.
Okay, good discussion. Any further questions of clarification? Seeing none, I'll be looking for a motion from the committee, and if you were, I'll just ask that you speak, specifically to the conditions, whether they remain the same, modifications or removal. I'll ask that you include that as part of your motion, not to put any pressure on you. Virginia?
Still can't find my raise hand button. Oh, well. The motion that I want to put forward is that application B08-2020 to sever the parcel of land be approved. But the conditions of Appendix A, I'm wanting to remove condition 1 and 6. I think there is a sufficient reference plan to deal with the severed lands. I don't think it's appropriate that we need it for the retained lands. And at this point, I think the applicants make a valid point. That's a huge portion of land that they're going to take from this property. It's going to be a lot of extra cost to remove whatever encumbrance is on there. And it really has nothing to do with this severance at this time. So I'd like to remove conditions 1 and 6 at this time. Number 8, I'm not sure about, so I didn't want to group that in there at this time, but definitely removing 1 and 6. Okay.
Greg, seconder. So any discussion on the motion? So a motion to approve the application with modifications to conditions number 1, or I guess removal of 1 and 6, and then 8 remains. We can certainly discuss the motion. Now is our opportunity. I'll just provide a little bit of comments based on the conditions. Certainly a reference plan was completed prior with the prior severances, and if the applicants are confident that would be enough to satisfy the land registry office with the consolidation or with the severance of the creation of the new lot, then that's I'm comfortable with that as well. The road widening, again, it's from a staff perspective from the city, it's our opportunity, or it's their opportunity to request these lands and take them. The Planning Act allows us to do so, and that typically applies to the subject land, so both severed and retained. However, Virginia, I appreciate your comments as well. When it comes down to the archaeological, Sean's right. You review the policies as they exist on the day of the application and the policies that are currently in play. If this severance application was being created, or if these 5 lots were being created today, certainly the subject lands fall within the area of identified to have some archaeological significance, or possibly. So perhaps we can modify that and specify that the archaeological assessment only applied to the lands being disturbed by development. So this would have the site plan identify kind of the area to be developed. So rather than develop or complete the study on the entirety of the subject lands, kind of moving closer to the river, we can narrow that down to kind of the footprint of the building, access, kind of where the land will be kind of reworked to allow for this development. I'll leave that out there, and perhaps if there's no further discussion, I'll look to Mr. Van Porten to support or speak to my suggestion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the suggestion. If I might, because I suspect the applicant will just be selling the land. We don't know what the development will be. Perhaps it can be relate to the area that is zoned suburban residential. I think that is your intent, and certainly that's the only area that can be disturbed.
Okay, I would agree. That's a established boundary for development, the area that is zoned. If the committee's comfortable with that, we can add that wording as a friendly amendment to condition number 8. So that the archaeological assessment only applied to the lands to be developed within the current suburban residential zone. Something like that. I'm seeing some. I see Greg is mouthing something. He's working some things out in his head.
I do that often. Be surprised. I take it you're saying the on the severed portion that is coded SR, correct? Not the entire
Right.
lands. Okay. I consider that a friendly amendment.
Okay. Virginia?
Chair, as the mover of the motion, I agree that's a friendly amendment to include that wording. Thanks.
Go ahead, Chris.
There's 3 different issues that I know Virginia, you've put like, there's 2 that you're okay with and the 1 you're not. Is there any way that we can change the motion so that we vote on the 3 separately? Or do we have to vote on yours and then bring up a new motion?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I did say that I was okay with the friendly amendment about condition 8, so it can all be added in unless the committee wants to separate them all out.
Well, I just have a problem with the taking of the road widening. I would want that the city actually took the road widening on the remainder as well, because I do not want the city to have to pay to buy that piece of property if at some point in time we widen the road.
Yeah, so at this moment, the motion is still on the floor. We have a friendly kind of agreement to the motion again is just speaking to the conditions, the removal of 1 and 6, and then the modification to the wording with additional wording to narrow the scope of the archaeological assessment to the lands that are zoned suburban residential. That applies to the severed lands. So that's the motion on the floor. If you have any issues or do not agree with that exact motion, then you would be your vote would be against the motion.
Okay.
No. Okay. Any discussion on that motion? I think our clerk is working on some wording. Okay, so we have the conditions in Appendix A with the removal of conditions 1 and 6, and that condition 8 be amended to apply only to the severed parcel. And within the lands or within the portion zoned suburban residential. So you can kind of work that out there. Appreciate all the patience. Within the portion zones. Yep, that looks good. Okay, so if there's no further discussion and everyone is happy with what they see on screen in terms of capturing the intent of our motion, we will call the recorded vote.
All those in favor of the motion before you, please raise your hand and leave it raised until you've heard your name called. Greg Kempa, Virginia Kershaw, Dan Namizniak. All those against the motion before you, please raise your hand and leave it raised until you've heard your name called. Tara Gaskin, Chris Brooks. Thank you. So the motion before you is approved on a recorded vote of 3-2.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so next application on the agenda this evening is a minor variance and consent application A13 and B9 2020 for the properties located at 70 and 73 Wadsworth Street. The agent or the applicant is here. We have a representative for the agent as well, or just the applicants. Who will be taking the lead? If you just want to raise your hand. Okay, so the floor is yours. Please introduce yourself and your team and provide me the details of your presentation.
Good evening. My name is Safar Hamadani. I'm from Canadian Construction and Consultant Engineers Inc. I represent the owner for the boundary adjustment for the land. The application is for lot boundary adjustment to the existing land. The land is actually two parts. One part is 779.19 square meter, and the other land is about 7,000 square meter. The application to adjust the land to add another 2,880 square meter to existing ground view flower and feeds property, and demolish the other part of the land and keep it vacant for the future development. The application is actually to also to request relief from the requirement for the side yard from 3 meter to 0 meter, because there is no enough side for this application. And also the application in general intent of the official plan. We plan to demolish the other part of the land, and we plan to develop the other land to make it for the existing site requirement. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions from the committee to the applicants? Seeing none, we'll invite staff in to present the planning staff report.
Okay, thank you. Chair and members of the committee, consent application for a boundary adjustment and minor variance application have been received for the lands municipally addressed as 70 and 73 Wadsworth Street. They are proposing to sever a portion off of 70 Wadsworth Street and add a parcel to 73 Wadsworth Street. The applicant is proposing to demolish the building at 70 Wadsworth Street to create a vacant lot for future industrial development. Next slide. So the site plan here is showing the land that will be severed off of 70 and merged with 73. So the blue area is currently part of the yellow area, and the blue will be merged with the green area. Next slide. To facilitate the development as proposed, the applicant is also requesting a variance, and that variance is to allow for a setback of 0 meters for the side yard, whereas 3 meters is required. The subject lands are designated residential area, medium density, in the official plan and zoned general industrial. The subject lands are located at the west end of Wadsworth Street. Directly north of the site is the CN rail corridor, and the subject lands are surrounded by industrially zoned properties, as well as a few residential properties to the south and southeast. Both 70 and 73 Wadsworth, the next photo, next slide, is the other building on the property. They both contain industrial buildings. And there is a narrow city-owned alley in front of the building you see in this photo, Penfold Alley, which is located along a portion of the frontage. So both properties also have frontage along Sydenham Street to the rear. And if you go to the next photo, that is the frontage off of Sydenham Street. So notice of this public hearing was issued by mail as well as by posting signs on the site, and we have not received any written submissions or verbal submissions from any members of the public. As mentioned, the property is zoned medium density residential. This designation permits a variety of residential uses, but does not permit any industrial uses. However, due to the general industrial zoning on the property is deemed to conform with the official plan, and the industrial uses can continue to exist. And the general industrial zoning on the property permits a variety of manufacturing uses, which is, and a variety of other industrial uses. And therefore, the use is a permitted use. So the proposed consent for boundary adjustment results in two appropriately sized industrial lots, both of which meet zoning requirements for the M2 zone. The proposed boundary adjustment allows for both properties to have frontage on both Sydenham and Wadsworth Streets. And this is beneficial for any new development that will be occurring in the future for 70 as well as 73, as there will be more room for access and parking. Additionally, the boundary adjustment will result in a lot area that meets the minimum lot requirements of the zoning bylaw for 73 Wadsworth Street, whereas it was previously undersized. Also, the new lot where the demolition will occur will be subject to site plan control, and any expansion of the existing building at 73 will be subject as well as if it's a large addition. The minor variance to allow a 0-meter interior side yard applies only to the newly created 73 Wadsworth Street, and this is to the end of the proposed, the demolition will occur on 70 Wadsworth Street until the property line of 73 Wadsworth Street. The 0-meter interior side yard does not present any issues from a planning perspective in terms of privacy and overlook, as both properties are industrially zoned and therefore there are no privacy concerns. Additionally, the building department has requested spatial separation calculations as a condition of the consent. And this limits the amount of windows, or if any, on the proposed wall, the wall that will be along the proposed property line. The lands at 73 Wadsworth Street as proposed will have access from both Wadsworth and Sydenham, and therefore a side yard is not required for access purposes. And for these reasons, planning staff are of the opinion that the minor variance meets the intent of the official plan and zoning bylaw and is appropriate for the development of the lands. Planning staff recommend that the consent application B09-2020 and minor variance application A13-2020 be approved, subject to the attached conditions in Appendix A.
Thank you for the presentation. I'll ask if the committee members have any questions of staff. And seeing no hands, I'll open the public portion of the hearing this evening, and I'll just confirm that there have been no members of the public who have registered this to speak. And I'll formally close the public portion. I'll ask if the committee has any further questions of clarification to the applicants or to staff. And if there's no further questions of clarification, I'll look for a motion. Chris?
Okay, so this is my second one of the evening than ever. I move to, I just want to get the right terminology again. I recommend that application A13 2020 and B09 2020 be approved as per staff's recommendation.
Seeking a seconder. Greg? And just confirming that that's as outlined in the report and subject to the attached conditions. Any discussion on this motion as we see it on the screen? No discussion. We'll call a recorded vote.
All those in favor of the motion before you, please raise your hand and leave it raised until you hear your name called. Tara Gaskin, Chris Brooks, Greg Kempa, Dana Mizniak, Virginia Kershaw. The motion is approved unanimously on a recorded vote.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next item, a minor variance application A14 2020 for the property located at 286 Brentwood Park Road. Is our agent or applicant present this evening? George, welcome.
Thank
you. Just want to introduce yourself and your proposal.
Yes, George Ziotek, 10 Humberstone Avenue, and I'm the agent for the owner at 286 Brentwood Park Road. The current owner, he has, or they have actually ownership of this property since 1978, which is about 42 years ago. And what they are proposing is to convert an integral one-car garage into additional living space to the single-family residential dwelling unit. The side yards of the existing property are 1.02 meters on the west side of the property and 2.18 meters on the east side of the property. My original interpretation of the zoning bylaw was that the conversion of the garage into a family or into a dwelling, as it were, portion would be a use that would be compliant to the zoning bylaws under the under the non-compliance use, as it were, as per section 661 of the zoning bylaw. And the zoning bylaw was passed in 1990, whereas the building that the owners have, they've been in possession of that since 1978. So that was my reasoning for that interpretation. So I guess what I would like to do is confirm that I am correct or incorrect on that interpretation. I was advised that minor variance would be required to take the integral garage, and having disposed of it as an integral garage, to have a 3-meter side yard to the property on both sides. The 3 meters in either side would be impossible, I suppose, because of the side yards that exist, as it were. So if in fact my assumption for a non-compliant use is incorrect, then I'm asking for approval for the minor variance to permit the side yards as exist, and also underlining that the current zoning bylaw allows the parking of a vehicle in the current driveway anyways. So that would be my presentation and requesting your approvals.
Thank you, George. Any questions from the committee to the applicant? Seeing none, we will invite staff to present the planning report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chair and members of the committee, this minor variance application applies to 286 Brentwood Park Road. The applicant is proposing to convert the existing integral garage into living space. And to facilitate that development, they are seeking relief from the section of the zoning bylaw 732171 to permit an interior side yard of 1 meter, whereas 3 meters is required where an integral garage is not provided. The property is designated low density residential and is zoned residential type 1B, which permits the existing single detached dwelling. The lands are located on the south side of Brentwood Park Road, and the property is located in an area that is made up of a variety of residential uses, both single and semi-detached. West of the site, down Brentwood Park Road, is Brandon Community Center, and the subject property has an area of approximately 512 square meters. With the proposed renovations to the property, there are no additions proposed at all. It is just simply interior renovations to create living space within the garage. So next slide. So this is the site plan just showing what's existing. And as I said, nothing will be changing in terms of any additions. Next slide. That's the existing dwelling on the property. As I mentioned, the property is designated under the official plan as low density residential, and the current use is consistent with the official plan designation and therefore meets the intent of the official plan. And the residential zoning, the use meets the R1B zone. However, the proposed renovation to the integral garage creates a situation where a different side yard is required. A 1 meter side yard is required where there is an integral garage, and a 3 meter side yard is required where there is not. And that is to ensure that there's appropriate parking, so that 3 meter side yard would be to allow for a car to park beside the house. However, with the existing setup, a car can park in the existing driveway and there's adequate space. And so we feel that the minor variance is appropriate. There is no impact to the surrounding neighborhood as there will be no visible changes to the property, and a 1 meter side yard is consistent with the remaining dwellings in the area. And there will be no negative impacts as adequate parking is still provided. Planning staff are of the opinion that the minor variance meets the intent of the official plan and zoning bylaw and is considered minor and appropriate for the development of the lands. And we circulated the application to members of the public within 60 meters and no response was received, as well as with this signposting on the site. And to respond to Mr. Ziotek's comments regarding the legal non-conforming status, because the garage right now is an integral garage and being used as such, once it's converted into living space, that integral garage is removed, and that is why the different setback is then required, because it currently is an integral garage and the use is changing now. So, and I believe that respond is everything. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Any questions from the committee to staff? And then seeing no questions, I'll formally open and close the public portion of the application's hearing, noting that no members of the public have registered to speak to this application this evening. So the public portion is closed. Any further questions of clarification from the committee to staff or the applicant? And if seeing none, I'll look for a motion from the committee. Greg?
Mr. Chair, would move that application A14/2020 be approved as shown in the report.
Seconder, Virginia. Any discussion on the motion as we see it in the report and on the screen? If there's no discussion, we will call the recorded vote.
All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand and leave it raised until your name is called. Tara Gaskin, Chris Brooks, Greg Kempa, Dan Nemizniak, Virginia Kershaw. Thank you. And item 3.6 is approved unanimously on a recorded vote.
Thank you, George.
Thank you very much.
The next item on the agenda, which I think is our last, is application for consent B10 and B11 2020 for the property located at 140 Oak Park Road. Our agent, MHBC Planning. And Mr. Aston has joined us. Welcome, Dave.
Hi, everyone.
So the floor is yours. If you want to give us the details of your proposal, just introduce yourself and who you're representing, and you can let us know.
Hi, thanks everyone. Thanks Dan and members of the committee. With me this evening, who I'm representing is Greg Sweetnam with TCA. So he's on the screen there as well. So we don't intend to take too much of your time, so we thought we would just show up together here. We've been working with staff on these lands for some time in context of approved plans of subdivision that surround the property. And this severance application is really going to facilitate investment in the city for a new large industrial distribution warehouse facility. So we see it as something important to be moving forward, separate from creating this lot essentially by default through registration of the plan of subdivision, which is likely to occur sometime this fall. But the importance of the timing, we are moving forward with a consent application. So in discussions with staff over the last 24 hours, which I should say that Alexandra and Nicole and Jeff have just been super helpful and great to work with to get this to you this evening as far as a modified proposal. We're looking at just creating the one large lot instead of the two severed lots, which was a small component to if the top of the plan is north by the city's water facility, but one large parcel now. And the boundary that you may seem to be floating is actually the proposed new Bowery Road in the industrial plan of subdivision. So that forms the southern limit of the parcel, and Oak Park to the east and then to the west is just another piece of land that is owned by TCA. So tonight we've worked with staff. We have reviewed the modified conditions and we have no concerns, and we're really looking forward to getting this approved, satisfying the conditions, and working with the city on the site plan that relates to these lands that was submitted and deemed complete today, actually. And that will address the details associated with how the lands are going to develop in the future. Oh, Greg, did you have anything to add, or I think that?
Just to say that, Telephone City's been involved, our company's been involved in the development of the Northwest Park. We had the exciting development, a number of years ago with the Ferrero Rocher addition in there, which has been a great employer in the area. We brought in Mitsui High Tech, working with the Economic Development Department and the province of Ontario which is one of the world's largest manufacturers of hybrid engine cores. And this new tenant, I think we're all bound by secrecy, but I think the city will be quite proud and quite excited because this will be another flagship tenant in the city's Northwest Business Park. So we're doing everything we can to facilitate getting them in there, getting Peter Bacano is going to be doing the construction there. So we're working all together as a team here with your staff to make sure we get this client installed and get some jobs and some assessment for the city. So we appreciate the committee's attention, and we look forward to working with the city to bring this exciting project forward.
Great, thanks, guys. Greg,
thank you.
Dave. So Dave, just to confirm, you're in agreement with the deferral of B11, which is the severance of the smaller parcel?
Yes.
Okay. And that's exciting news, Greg. You know, bringing new tenants to the area. There's certainly that edge of the kind of that Oak Park Road portion of that area has really started to grow, and that's always exciting. So,
Mr. Chair,
yep.
Sorry, Dan. I was wondering, we had worked with staff, and I think maybe Alexandra is going to present your question on are we okay with deferral? We are, but I think what's actually happening to get the staff recommendation for approval is that there was a modification to the application. And that's what we're asking for approval. Alexandra circulated an updated memo. And I'm sure she will present on that, but I just wanted to be clear with my response.
Okay, yep. It's my understanding, and I know that we had a memo circulated to us that looked something like this in our email today, and I know staff will speak to it in detail. Yep. Okay, any further questions to the applicants, agents from the committee? I see no hands, so we'll have staff come to the table now and present the modifications and the details of the proposal and the recommendation.
Chair, members of the committee, planning staff have received consent applications for the lands municipally addressed as 140 Oak Park Road. The property is located on the west side of the future Oak Park Road extension, east of Masters Lane and south of Kramer's Way / Hardy Road. The existing 33.2 hectare lot is a portion of the lands owned by the Telephone City Aggregates, or TCA, and was created through the consent application B24/2005 in order to create a site for future industrial development. There are currently no structures located on the lands, and they are subject to the licenses under the Aggregate Resources Act. These licenses permit the extraction of sand and gravel from the subject lands. The majority of the subject lands is designated in the city's official plan as general industrial area, and a small portion of the southwest corner of the proposed retained lands is also designated neighborhood commercial. The subject lands are zoned holding general industrial exception 12 zone and holding general industrial exception 55. Since the time of writing the report, planning staff have received a request from the agent to withdraw application B11/2020, the application for the smaller lot located on the northwest side of the subject lands. As a result of the request for the withdrawal of this application, the agent is now proposing to amend application B10/2020 to include the balance of the lands that were subject to the application B11/2020. The proposed would create a severed lot with approximately 224,594 square meters in area and a retained parcel of approximately 106,709 square meters. The proposed severed parcel is in order to create an industrial lot within the city of Brantford. The proposed retained lands are included in Phase 1 industrial lands of the draft plan of subdivision 29T11-505 and the subsequent redlined revisions to the draft plan of subdivision 29T18-504. Next slide. This is a picture of the lands as existing. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Sorry, and this is an image taken from the draft plan of subdivision. So the retained lands are proposed to be subdivided into industrial lots and will create part of the proposed Street G off the Oak Park Road extension. The proposed severed lot will have access through Street G of the subdivision off of Oak Park Road extension. The servicing and the creation of the Oak Park Road extension is currently underway and it is anticipated that the subdivision will be finalized this year. Do you mind going back 2 slides? Thank you. The consent application as amended was reviewed in light of provincial and municipal policy, and planning staff are still of the opinion that the proposed consent application B10-2020 meets the criteria under section 5124 of the Planning Act, is desirable and compatible with the surrounding area, and will not result in adverse impacts on surrounding properties. The proposal as amended will continue to provide a broad range of industrial uses in Brantford and is in accordance with the applicable planning policy in the PPS growth plan and official plan. Planning staff recommend that the amendment to the planning staff recommend an amendment to the conditions that were listed in Appendix A1 of Report 2020-358 in order to remove the condition 2 regarding the certificate of official for application B11-2020 being issued prior to the certificate of official being issued for application B10-2020. Planning staff are in agreement with the applicant's request and recommend that application B2020 be approved subject to the conditions that were outlined in the memo sent to staff or sent to the committee this afternoon. I'm open to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you for the presentation and the explanation of the amendment to the application. So we'll only be dealing with B10, but it's a modified version which incorporates what B11 was requesting to create. So do all the committee members have that information available to them in their email? So the modified wording has been included in that memo, as well as the sketch and the revised conditions. Any questions from the committee to staff? I see no questions. So I will open and close the public portion of tonight's evening. I'll note that no members of the public have registered to speak for the record. And I will close the public portion, and I'll just ask if the committee members have any questions of clarification to staff or to the applicant or agent. I see no hands, so I'll look for a committee to put a motion on the floor. Virginia, thank you.
Hi there. I'll move the updated recommendation regarding application B10-2020 be approved, subject to the new conditions as outlined in the memo that we got from planning staff this afternoon.
Great. Seconder, Greg. Is there any discussions on the motion as we see it? I see no hands, so we will call the recorded vote.
All those in favor of the motion before you, please raise your hand and leave it raised until you've heard your name called. Tara Gaskin, Chris Brooks, Greg Kempa, Dan Mizniak, Virginia Kershaw. Thank you. The motion is approved unanimously on a recorded vote.
Okay, Dave, Greg, appreciate your patience this evening. I'm not sure if you were on the meeting the whole time, but we've been going for some time now. So it's nice that you're at home. You get to be comfortable and kind of snack away throughout.
Yeah, that's right. Watch the
throughout
hockey
meeting.
game.
That's right.
Thanks,
Thank you very
everyone.
much.
Yep. Thank you, guys.
Bye.
So I believe that does it for items this evening. We'll just kind of continue to work through the agenda. So this is a different looking one, isn't it? Right. Yeah, we can approve the minutes. Oh, there it is. Greg, approving the minutes from the July 15th meeting.
I would move to do so.
Excellent. Seconder. Chris. Forget how we do this now. Recorded vote.
All those in favor, please raise your hand and leave it raised until you heard your name called. Tara Gaskin, Chris Brooks, Greg Kempa, Dana Mizniak, Virginia Kershaw. Thank you. The minutes are approved unanimously on a recorded vote.
Excellent. Any other items for consideration or information or updates? Yep. Okay, our clerk has some updates. Will you be joining us on screen?
I guess I could. I don't know where. Oh, there we go. Okay, thank you, everyone. And through you, Chair, we are currently in the process of recruiting positions, putting that on the website and also to the newspaper with a hope to fill the positions in October. And I did want the committee to be aware that one of our members has not sent regrets for the 3 meetings necessary, which under Chapter 26 of the City of Brantford Municipal Code, the committee can move a motion to ask that position be created as vacant now moving forward so that we can, and then direct staff to actually fill that position. We are in the place of filling positions or going to moving forwards. There have been multiple attempts to reach out and unfortunately no response whatsoever. We do hope that everything is okay. However, we do have a vacancy. If someone would like to move a resolution to deem the position vacant, we vote on that, we can then start advertising to fill the position.
Someone who's, so that I'm clear, we've had someone miss 3 meetings in a row and not giving you any kind of heads up. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct. No regrets whatsoever have been sent. No response to any of the meetings, nor any response to the attempts to reach out to the person.
And completely incommunicado during those 90 days?
Correct.
Okay, then I'll be the badass. I'd be. It's probably a bad word, wasn't it?
I don't have a bleeper.
We're live, Greg.
We declare a vacancy amongst the committee and direct staff to advertise for a replacement to the team as soon as possible.
Virginia, seconder.
I second that word for word. Well, almost word for word.
We have an opportunity to discuss the motion. Yeah. Any discussion points on that? I think it's definitely appropriate to fill a vacant position, especially on a committee like this where we are often referred to as the Common Sense Committee, where we have a group of non-elected officials who have different perspectives, different backgrounds. We listen to applicants, to staff, to members of the public who are speaking for or against any application. So the more kind of wide range perspective we can offer kind of all sides definitely benefits the committee and benefits the quality of the decisions that we're making. Any further discussion before we call the vote? So we will have a recorded vote.
Yes, please. All those in favor of the motion to declare the position vacant, please raise your hand and leave it raised until you hear your name called. Tara Gaskin, Chris Brooks, Dana Mizniak, Greg Kempa, Virginia Kershaw, Thank you. The motion is approved unanimously on a recorded vote, and we will go ahead and advertise.
Excellent. Okay. Great. So any committee members have any items, questions to discuss? I assume that we will be in this format in September as well. Oh, one more update from the clerk.
I do apologize, members, through you, Chair. In this virtual format that we are in, we used to be able to hold a variety of meetings overlapping, some meetings, in different rooms. However, now that we go live on YouTube, we have to be conscientious of overlapping committee meetings that need the YouTube Live account. As such, we do have a conflict in September now for our September meeting date, which was, if I could just pull this up for you, our September meeting date is September the 9th. So I will be seeking to change that date if possible to the 10th. But a formal email will come out in regards to that. And if we are unable to achieve quorum, we will look for a date to achieve quorum. So just so you know, that email will come.
Okay. Thank you. So if there are no further items to discuss.
Through you,
Oh.
Mr. Chair, sorry.
Oh, Alex.
Staff here. The application for 395 Park Road North, which was appealed to the LPAT, is it was appealed to the LPAT and was scheduled for March, and then due to COVID, the committee or the LPAT has delayed their meetings and their hearings. So now the hearing is now proposed for September 29th, 2020. So just an update on that application.
Thank you. Any idea of how many items we have for September?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think it's just one item on the agenda, so it could be a quick meeting, quicker than tonight at least.
Let's hope. Okay, great. Thank you to the agents, applicants, members of the public who are tuning in. Thank you to staff for the work and the input and guiding us through this process. Thank you to the committee members for participating. I'll call the meeting. I need a formal motion to do that. No formal motion, but I'm going to look for one. Greg, can I get a formal motion to adjourn the meeting?
With pleasure.
Thank you. A seconder, everybody? Excellent. Okay, stay safe. We'll see you next month. Take care.
Thank